I'm Elaine, 68 years old and a widow for nearly 3 decades now. The words still echo in my mind like a cruel recording on repeat. You're not family, you only stayed because it was convenient. My daughter Margaret said this while signing inheritance papers, her eyes cold as winter. My son-in-law James just sat there silent as stone. With trembling hands, I signed another document they didn't expect, then walked away without a word. They had no idea what was coming. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Some words can destroy relationships in an instant, but some decisions can change lives forever. My story begins like many others, with love, hope, and dreams of a beautiful future. I met William during my sophomore year of college. He was studying engineering, and I was pursuing a degree in finance. We married right after graduation and settled in a small starter home in Minneapolis. 3 years later, our daughter Margaret was born. 7 pounds 2 ounces of pure joy with her father's blue eyes and my auburn hair. William was the love of my life, a kind and hard-working man who put family above everything else. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable and deeply happy. That happiness shattered when William suffered a massive heart attack when Margaret was just 10 years old. Despite the doctor's best efforts, he didn't survive. I was 39, suddenly a widow with a young daughter to raise alone. The life insurance policy helped initially, but I knew I needed to secure our future. I threw myself into my career at First National Bank, working my way up from loan officer to branch manager over the next decade. Every promotion, every raise went toward Margaret's college fund and our modest savings. Those years were difficult, but strengthening. I learned to be both mother and father to Margaret, fixing leaky faucets and helping with math homework, attending parent-teacher conferences alone, and coaching her through her first heartbreak. I sacrificed dating and social life to focus entirely on giving Margaret the best possible upbringing. Through careful budgeting and some wise investments suggested by colleagues in the financial sector, I built a respectable nest egg. Nothing extravagant, but enough to ensure Margaret could attend college without student loans and that I could eventually retire comfortably. As Margaret grew into a young woman, I noticed traits developing that concerned me. She had William's beauty, but none of his selflessness. Where he would give his last dollar to someone in need, Margaret held tightly to what was hers and always wanted more. I blamed myself, wondering if I had overcompensated for her fatherless childhood by giving her too much. When Margaret brought home James during her senior year of college, I was cautiously optimistic. He came from a struggling family in rural Wisconsin, had worked his way through state college, and had ambitious plans to start his own real estate development company. His humble background seemed to ground Margaret, and I appreciated his respectful demeanor and work ethic. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said during that first meeting, "I want you to know how much I admire how you raised Margaret on your own. My own mother struggled similarly after my father left. Strong women like you are the backbone of this country." His words warmed my heart, and over the next year I grew genuinely fond of James. When he proposed to Margaret, I was delighted. The wedding 15 years ago was modest by today's standards, but I happily contributed most of my savings to give them a beautiful celebration and a generous start to their married life. "Mum, you've done so much for us," Margaret said on her wedding day, hugging me tightly. "James and I will always take care of you, I promise." Those words would prove bitterly ironic in the years to come. The first few years of their marriage, James worked for a commercial real estate firm while developing contacts for his own business. Margaret completed her master's degree in marketing and secured a position with an advertising agency. They seemed to be building a solid foundation, and I was proud of them both. But gradually I noticed changes in James. The respectful young man who had charmed me became increasingly focused on status and wealth. He leased luxury cars before they could afford them and talked endlessly about moving up to more prestigious neighborhoods. Margaret, always materialistic, eagerly embraced this new focus. James says appearances matter in his business, she explained when I questioned their lavish spending. We need to look successful to be successful. As James's business finally took off, their lifestyle expanded accordingly. But I noticed something troubling. Their interest in my financial affairs seemed to grow in direct proportion to their own success. What had begun as occasional questions about my retirement planning became more frequent inquiries about my investments, life insurance, and savings. We just want to make sure you're taken care of, Mum, Margaret would say. But the gleam in her eye told a different story. And James, once so genuine in his affection, now calculated the value of everything and everyone around him. I didn't realize then that they were already seeing me as an asset rather than family. That painful revelation would come much later. The pattern of giving began innocently enough. When Margaret and James found their first home, a lovely colonial in a good school district, they were short on the down payment. Without hesitation, I offered them $50,000 from my savings. It's an investment in your future, I told them. Your father would have wanted you to have a good start. They were appropriately grateful then, with Margaret crying happy tears and James promising to pay me back someday. That repayment never materialized, but I didn't mind. Seeing them establish their home brought me joy. 2 years later, Emma was born, followed by Daniel 18 months after that. Margaret struggled with the idea of balancing career and motherhood, frequently calling me in tears. Mum, the daycare costs are killing us, and I'm missing all their milestones, she sobbed one evening. But we can't afford for me to stay home, not with the mortgage, and James still building his business. The solution seemed obvious. I was approaching retirement age and living alone in my modest 3-bedroom home. Why not sell it and move closer to help with my grandchildren? I could watch Emma and Daniel while you're at work, I suggested. You'd save on childcare costs, and I'd get to be part of their daily lives. Margaret and James enthusiastically embraced my proposal. I sold my house, clearing nearly $300,000 after paying off the remaining mortgage. Instead of buying another property, I suggested something that in retrospect was my first major mistake. What if I contribute to buying a larger house where we could all live together? I could have a mother-in-law suite, and you'd have more space for the growing family. They loved the idea, especially when I offered to contribute 60% of the purchase price for a beautiful 5-bedroom house in an upscale neighborhood with excellent schools. We agreed I would have the downstairs bedroom suite with its own bathroom and small sitting area, giving all of us some privacy. The arrangement worked beautifully at first. I adored caring for my grandchildren, watching Emma's first steps and hearing Daniel's first words. Margaret could focus on her career without guilt, and James had more capital to invest in his business. I contributed to household expenses, despite their initial protests paying for groceries and utilities. When Emma reached school age, I offered to cover her private school tuition. The public schools are fine, Mum, Margaret said initially. I know, but Westbrook Academy has that advanced science program Emma would thrive in. Let me do this for her, I insisted. And so began another financial commitment that would eventually include both grandchildren's education. Beyond the financial support, I poured my heart into raising Emma and Daniel during their formative years. I helped with homework, attended their sports events and recitals, nursed them through chickenpox and broken bones, and tried to instill the values William and I had cherished: honesty, compassion, and the importance of family. The children and I developed a special bond. Emma, now a thoughtful teenager, would seek my advice about everything from friend troubles to her future career plans. Daniel and I shared a love of history and spent hours discussing books and documentaries. But as the children grew less dependent on constant care, I noticed Margaret and James's attitude toward me shifting. What had once been appreciation became expectation. My contributions to the household were no longer met with gratitude, but accepted as obligation. The first serious cracks appeared when James made some poor investment decisions, pouring money into a shopping centre development that ultimately failed. One evening, he came to my room uncharacteristically humble. "Elaine, I hate to ask this, but we're in a bit of a financial bind," he admitted. "The riverfront project went under and I'm leveraged pretty heavily. We might lose the house if I can't cover the next payment to investors." Without hesitation, I wrote him a check for $120,000, nearly half my remaining liquid assets. "No interest, no rush to pay it back," I assured him. "Family helps family." He squeezed my hand gratefully, but I noticed he didn't make eye contact. The money disappeared into his business. The crisis apparently averted, but no mention of repayment ever came. After that, subtle changes accelerated. Margaret began complaining about lack of privacy with me in the house. James questioned my expenditures, despite the fact that I was spending my own money. The grandchildren were encouraged to participate in more activities that kept them away from home and from me. "Mom, could you keep your television down after 8? James has early meetings," Margaret would say. Or, "We'd like to have dinner just the four of us tonight if you don't mind eating in your room." I was slowly being relegated to the periphery of the family I had sacrificed so much for. The situation came to a head when I mentioned wanting to take a 3-week cruise to Alaska, something I'd dreamed of for years. "3 weeks? That's impossible," Margaret declared. "Who would pick up the kids from their activities? And Emma has that science competition you promised to help her prepare for." "I thought it might be nice to have some time to myself," I said quietly. "I haven't taken a real vacation in years." "That's rather selfish, Mom," Margaret replied coldly. "You know we depend on you here." That was the moment I first saw clearly what I had become to them. Not a beloved mother and grandmother, but a convenient resource to be utilized. The realization broke my heart, but I still wasn't ready to accept the full truth of my situation. The whispered conversations were my first clue that something more troubling was brewing. I would enter a room to find Margaret and James huddled together, only to have them abruptly change the subject when they noticed me. "Just discussing Christmas plans," Margaret would say in July, or James would suddenly become fascinated by the weather forecast. Then I noticed items being moved around the house, particularly my personal belongings. My collection of antique silver that had been in my family for generations was relocated from the dining room hutch to a box in the attic. The oil painting William had given me for our 5th anniversary disappeared from the living room wall, replaced by a modern print Margaret had purchased. "We're just updating the decor, Mum," she explained when I questioned these changes. "This style works better with the room's aesthetic," but I wasn't imagining the systematic inventory taking place. One afternoon, I returned early from my volunteer work at the library to find James photographing my jewelry box contents, including my mother's pearl necklace and the diamond earrings William had given me on our last anniversary together. "Oh, just documenting valuables for insurance purposes," he said smoothly, closing the box quickly. But I had seen him carefully examining the quality marks inside my grandmother's gold bracelet. The most disturbing incident occurred when I overheard a phone conversation never meant for my ears. I was reading in the garden when Margaret's voice drifted through the open kitchen window. "The Sunshine Valley facility looks really nice in the brochures," she was saying. "Private rooms, activities, and full nursing care when needed. Yes, they take Medicare after the private funds run out. Well, between her savings and the house equity contribution, we could probably cover 3 to 5 years before having to tap into other assets." My blood ran cold. They were planning to move me to a nursing home. Despite the fact that I was in excellent health for my age, still drove volunteered regularly and was fully independent. I called my oldest friend Patricia that evening, sharing my growing concerns over coffee at her apartment. Elaine, I hate to say this, but they're setting you up, Patricia said bluntly. You contributed to the house purchase, you've paid for the grandchildren's education, you've bailed out James's business, and now they're planning your exit strategy. You need to protect yourself. But they're my family, I protested weakly. Blood doesn't always mean loyalty, Patricia replied. My sister went through something similar with her son. You need to see a lawyer immediately. Taking Patricia's advice, I made a discreet appointment with Alan Peterson, an elder law attorney recommended by another friend. I shared my situation, including the financial contributions I'd made to the family over the years. Did you get anything in writing about your contribution to the house purchase? He asked. Just the deed, which has all three of our names on it, I admitted. That's something. He nodded. But we should document everything else. The school tuition payments, the business loan, all of it. And we need to discuss your estate planning too. I left his office with homework: gather all financial records and documentation of my contributions to the family. This process proved enlightening and disturbing. While searching for some old bank statements in James's home office when everyone was out, I discovered an email he'd printed. It was from an estate attorney responding to questions about challenging a will and the legal concept of undue influence. He had been researching how to ensure maximum access to my assets after my death, or perhaps before. The final confirmation came when I borrowed Margaret's laptop to check my email when mine was being repaired. Her search history revealed inquiries about moving elderly parent to care facility, selling home with elderly owner, and accessing parents' retirement accounts. Meanwhile, the atmosphere at home grew increasingly tense. Even the grandchildren began reflecting their parents' attitudes. Emma, once so close to me, became distant and preoccupied with friends. Daniel, still somewhat affectionate, was chided by James for being too dependent on his grandmother. I felt like a stranger in the home I had helped create. Margaret began discussing converting my suite into a home gym once Emma left for college in a year. You hardly use all that space anyway, Mum, she said casually. We could move you upstairs to the smaller guest room. It would be cozy. And each night I retreated to my room earlier, avoiding the family dynamics that now excluded me. And each night I updated my secret project. A comprehensive record of everything I owned, had contributed, and was entitled to. I also made regular discreet visits to Alan's office, where we put into motion a plan that would eventually change everything. The evening it all came to a head began innocuously enough. I was reading in my room when Margaret knocked on my door, her smile artificially bright. Mum, could you join us in the study? James and I want to discuss something important with you. I followed her down the hallway, my stomach knotting with apprehension. James sat behind his desk, a folder of documents spread before him. An untouched cup of tea waited for me, a transparent attempt at creating a comforting atmosphere. Elaine, we've been thinking about your future care needs, James began without preamble. As we get older, it's important to have plans in place. My care needs, I echoed, though I knew exactly where this was heading. I'm in excellent health. My last physical showed the heart and bones of someone 10 years younger, according to Dr. Winters. Yes, but that could change quickly at your age, Margaret interjected. We've been researching some wonderful retirement communities. James pushed a glossy brochure across the desk. Sunshine Valley has independent living apartments, but also offers assisted living and nursing care when needed. It's a continuum of care approach. I glanced at the brochure, the same facility I'd overheard them discussing. This looks like a nursing home. It's a life care community, Margaret corrected, her tone patronizing. They have activities, dining rooms, transportation services. You'd have friends your own age. I have friends my own age, I pointed out. I volunteer with several, have my book club, my garden society. But you wouldn't have to worry about home maintenance, cooking, cleaning, James continued as if I hadn't spoken. And the most important thing is that you'd have professional care available when you need it. When have I ever needed care from either of you? I asked quietly. I'm the one who cooks. Most meals, tends the garden, drives the children to activities, and contributes substantially to this household's expenses. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. That's not entirely accurate, Mum. We provide your housing after all. The audacity of that statement stunned me. I paid for 60% of this house, Margaret. My name is on the deed alongside yours. Well, yes, but we've been paying the taxes and insurance, James countered. And I've been paying the utilities, buying most of the groceries, and covering your children's private school tuition, I reminded them. Not to mention the $120,000 I loaned you when your riverfront project failed. Money you've never mentioned repaying. A flash of anger crossed James's face. That was a family matter. Family helps family. Indeed, I said softly. Family helps family. I've helped you both establish careers by providing free childcare for years. I've contributed financially to every aspect of this household. I've been both grandmother and often primary caregiver to Emma and Daniel. And we appreciate that, Margaret said quickly. But the reality is, Mum, you're getting older. We need to think practically. Practically, I repeated. Is it practical to move a healthy, independent person to an institutional setting that costs thousands of dollars monthly? Or is it practical to continue the arrangement that has benefited everyone for 15 years? James cleared his throat. There's also the matter of this house. It's really too large for our needs now that the children are getting older. We've been considering selling and downsizing. Without discussing it with me, a co-owner, the pieces were falling into place now. We thought you'd be settled at Sunshine Valley by then, Margaret said, confirming my worst suspicions. They have a unit available next month. We've already put down a deposit to hold it. I sat back momentarily speechless. They had planned my entire future without any consultation, assuming I would quietly comply. And if I don't want to move to Sunshine Valley? I finally asked. Margaret's face hardened. Mum, be reasonable. You can't live alone at your age, and we need our space as a family. As a family, I repeated slowly. And where do I fit in this family, Margaret? She exchanged a glance with James before delivering the blow that would change everything between us forever. Let's be honest, Mum. You're not really family in the same way. You've stayed here because it was convenient for everyone, but things change. Needs change. The words struck me like a physical blow. Not family, I'm not family. James remained silent, staring at his hands, his complicity evident in his refusal to contradict his wife. I didn't mean it like that. Margaret backpedaled, seeing my expression. Of course you're family, but there's our immediate family unit. And then there's extended family. I see. I stood up slowly, steadying myself against the chair. I understand completely now. As I turned to leave, Emma stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. She had heard everything. Behind her, Daniel looked confused and upset. How could you say that to Grandma? Emma choked out, before running to her room. I walked past Daniel, gently touching his shoulder, then returned to my suite, locked the door, and allowed myself to finally break down. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest that made it difficult to breathe. For hours I sobbed into my pillow, mourning not just the loss of my place in the family, but the death of an illusion I had nurtured for years. As dawn broke, I dried my tears and made a decision. If I wasn't family, then I had no obligation to continue sacrificing for them. They wanted me gone. I would go, but on my terms, not theirs. The plan I had been developing with Alan would now be executed in full. They've made their choice, I whispered to myself. Now I'll make mine. The next morning I called Alan's office from my car, parked safely away from the house. They've made their move, I told him. I need to implement everything we discussed. How soon can we proceed? I have all the paperwork ready, Vil, he assured me. We can execute everything today if you'd like. At his office, we reviewed the facts of my situation. I had contributed $300,000 to the house purchase with my name on the deed as co-owner. I had paid approximately $190,000 in private school tuition for both grandchildren over the years. I had loaned James $120,000 for his business with no repayment. Additionally, I had contributed approximately $2,000 monthly to household expenses for 15 years. You've put over $700,000 into this family, not counting the monthly contributions, Alan calculated. And now they want to put you in a home and potentially sell your house from under you. That's correct? I confirmed, my voice steady despite the pain. Well, we're prepared, Alan assured me. As discussed, I've drawn up documents to protect your assets and revise your estate plan. The new plan was comprehensive. First, I would formally document my ownership percentage of the house and file a legal notice preventing its sale without my consent. Second, I would transfer most of my remaining assets into an irrevocable trust with my grandchildren as beneficiaries, but only accessible when they turned 25, with specific educational and needs-based exceptions. Third, I would create a small, simple will, leaving nominal amounts to Margaret and James, just enough that they couldn't claim I forgot them, not enough to benefit them significantly. This would be the document they would know about. Finally, and most importantly, I had used some of my remaining liquid assets to purchase a small, comfortable home in a pleasant retirement community in Arizona, a place I had visited with Patricia and loved for its desert beauty and active lifestyle for seniors. Are you sure about this, Elaine? Alan asked as I signed document after document. It's a dramatic change. I've never been more certain, I replied. They've shown me who they truly are and what I mean to them. I'm simply responding accordingly. With everything in place, we crafted a strategic approach for the final confrontation. I would appear to go along with their plans, initially letting them believe I was compliant while I finalized my arrangements. Alan prepared 2 sets of documents, the ones Margaret and James expected me to sign, and the ones that would actually protect me. What about the grandchildren? Alan asked gently. This will affect your relationship with them. Emma and Daniel are almost adults, I said, though my heart ached at the thought of separation. Emma will be in college next year, and Daniel 2 years after that. I've set up the trust for their benefit, and they'll understand someday. I hope. As I left Alan's office, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. For the first time in 15 years, I was making decisions based solely on what was best for me, not sacrificing for the comfort and convenience of others. I drove to see my friend Patricia and shared the details of my plan. It's about time, she said firmly. You've given everything to them, and they've taken it all for granted. Now you need to take care of yourself. I feel guilty about the grandchildren, I admitted. You've set up their education funds in the trust, Patricia reminded me. And nothing prevents you from maintaining a relationship with them independently. They're old enough to understand that adults sometimes have conflicts. Over the next week, I quietly prepared for my departure. I secured important documents and keepsakes, arranged for my personal mail to be forwarded to a P.O. box, and packed essential items in small batches, storing them in my car trunk or at Patricia's apartment. all while pretending to consider the Sunshine Valley option. I think Mum's coming around. I overheard Margaret tell James one evening. She's been looking at those brochures we gave her. James sounded relieved. Good. The real estate agent thinks we could list the house for at least 20% more than we paid, even accounting for the market fluctuations. They were already counting their profits from selling my portion of the house. The final piece of my plan fell into place when Alan called to confirm everything was ready. The trust is established, the new property closing is complete, and the legal notices about the house co-ownership have been prepared, he reported. We just need your final signatures on everything. I'll bring them to sign their documents this weekend, I told him. Can you arrange for a notary to be present? Already done, Alan confirmed. Saturday at 2 p.m. The stage was set for the final act of this painful family drama. Saturday arrived with a tense atmosphere in the house. Margaret had been telling Emma and Daniel that Grandma is making an important decision about her future care, preparing them for my supposed agreement to enter Sunshine Valley. James had arranged for a notary, a colleague from his office who did this as a side business, to come to the house at 2 p.m. The dining room table was cleared for what Margaret called our family meeting. At precisely 2 o'clock, everyone gathered around the table. The grandchildren sat quietly, Emma still cold toward her parents after overhearing their cruel words days earlier. Daniel looked confused and anxious. Margaret and James appeared barely able to contain their satisfaction on believing they had successfully managed my removal. We're here to finalize some important documents regarding Elaine's future care arrangements, James explained to the notary, a young woman named Melissa, who looked uncomfortable with the obvious tension in the room. Margaret spread out several documents. These papers authorize the release of funds for the Sunshine Valley deposit and initial year's payment, and these confirm your understanding of the transition plan. I examined each document carefully, reading every word, despite Margaret's impatient sighs. The papers effectively transferred control of my finances to them as care managers and acknowledged my voluntary entry into the facility. They had even included a provision allowing them to sell my portion of the house as my designated representatives. Everything looks in order, I said calmly, causing visible relief in both their faces. Great. James pushed a pen toward me. If you'll just sign where indicated, we can get this taken care of. I signed each document methodically, feeling their eager eyes watching every movement. There's just one thing, I said as I finished the last signature. I have some papers of my own that need signing. Margaret frowned. What papers? Just some estate planning documents my friend recommended, I said vaguely, reaching into my handbag to retrieve the folder Alan had prepared. James looked annoyed, but nodded curtly. Fine, let's get everything done at once. I pulled out several official-looking documents and passed them to Melissa, the notary. These need witnessing as well. As Melissa reviewed the documents to prepare them for notarization, I decided to have one moment of complete honesty with my daughter. Margaret, before we finish, I want to ask you something. Do you consider me family, truly family? Margaret looked startled by the direct question, then irritated. Mum, we've been through this. Of course you're family, but we need to be practical about arrangements now that you're aging. That's not what you said the other night, I pressed. You said, and I quote, "You're not really family in the same way. You've stayed here because it was convenient." James shifted uncomfortably. Elaine, that was just a heated moment. Let's focus on finalizing these arrangements that benefit everyone. Benefit everyone, I repeated softly. Or benefit you two specifically. Margaret's patience visibly snapped. Fine. You want the unvarnished truth. You've been useful, Mum. You've helped with the kids, contributed to the house, bailed out James's business. But you're not part of our core family unit. You never have been. You've stayed because it was convenient for you too. Free housing time with the grandkids. But things change, needs evolve, and now we need our space. James didn't contradict her, simply staring at his hands as he had done that first night. His silence spoke volumes. I see, I said, feeling strangely calm, despite the cruelty of her words. Thank you for that clarity. I turned to Melissa, who looked horrified by what she had just witnessed. I'm ready to sign my documents now. The papers I signed included formal notice of my 60% ownership of the house, with restriction against sale, without my explicit written consent revocation of any financial powers previously granted to Margaret or James, and confirmation of the establishment of the Grandchildren's Trust. What exactly are those papers? James asked, suddenly alert to the possibility that things weren't proceeding as planned. Just putting my affairs in order, I said vaguely as Melissa stamped and signed as witness. When all was completed, I gathered my copies of the documents and stood up. Where are you going? Margaret asked, frowning. I need some fresh air. It's been an emotional afternoon. I walked toward the door, then paused. Emma Daniel, I love you both very much. Never forget that. Emma rushed to hug me, whispering, I heard what Mum said. I don't agree with her, Grandma. Daniel looked confused but hugged me as well. Are you going somewhere, Grandma? I'll be in touch soon. I promised them both, memorizing their faces as if for the last time. I walked out the front door to my already packed car, hearing Margaret call after me. Mum. Mum, where are you going? We're not finished here. But we were finished. I drove away from the house I had helped create from the family that had decided I wasn't really family at all. I didn't look back. 3 days later, Margaret received formal notification from Alan's office about all the legal documents I had signed, including the protection of my house ownership and the creation of the Grandchildren's Trust. The money they had expected to access, both from selling the house and from my estate, was now legally protected. I was already on my way to Arizona, to the small but beautiful home I had purchased in a community where I could start fresh, make new friends, and live the remainder of my life with dignity and self-respect. As I crossed the state line into my new future, I felt the weight of years of unappreciated sacrifice lift from my shoulders. For the first time in decades, I was putting myself first, and it felt like freedom. My little adobe-style home in Sedona welcomed me like an old friend. With its terracotta roof, desert landscaping, and stunning views of the red rock formations, it couldn't have been more different from the traditional suburban house I'd left behind. That contrast felt symbolic, a physical representation of my life's new direction. The retirement community, aptly named Desert Horizons, offered the perfect balance of independence and community. My 2-bedroom home provided plenty of space for my needs, while the community center housed a library, pool, fitness center, and various activity rooms. Within days, I joined a hiking group, a book club, and a watercolor class. You're certainly jumping right in, commented Sylvia, my next-door neighbor, as we shared iced tea on my patio 2 weeks after my arrival. I've spent too many years living for others, I explained. Now I'm discovering who Elaine is when she's just Elaine, not primarily a mother or grandmother or convenient household manager. That discovery process was both exhilarating and occasionally painful. Some nights I cried myself to sleep, missing the grandchildren fiercely and wondering if I'd made the right decision. But those moments became fewer as I built a new life surrounded by people who valued my company for its own sake. Exactly 16 days after I left Minnesota, my phone rang with Margaret's number. I had been expecting this call, though not quite so soon. "Where are you?" she demanded without preamble when I answered. "Hello, Margaret. I'm in my new home," I replied calmly. "New home? What are you talking about?" And what are these papers we received from some lawyer? Something about the house and a trust. Those documents confirm my legal rights as 60% owner of the house, establish a trust for Emma and Daniel's future education and needs, and reorganize my estate planning. I explained as if discussing the weather. You can't do this. Her voice rose in panic. We had an agreement. You signed the Sunshine Valley papers. Those papers have been legally voided by my attorney as they were signed under duress and misrepresentation. The notary provided a statement confirming the hostile environment and your statements about me not being family. Silence fell for several seconds before Margaret spoke again, her voice shaking with rage. This is about what I said, isn't it? You're punishing us over one heated comment. No, Margaret. This is about 15 years of being taken advantage of, culminating in an attempt to remove me from my own home and take control of my assets, I corrected her. Your comment simply confirmed what I'd already begun to suspect, that you and James see me as a resource, not as family. That's not true, she protested, but without conviction. It is true, and now we'll move forward with the truth in the open. I've relocated to a place where I'm happy and independent. You and James can continue living in the house, but it cannot be sold without my consent, which I will not be giving. Mom, be reasonable. We can't afford to buy you out, and we can't move because of James's business connections here. Then continue living there, I said simply. Consider it the generous housing arrangement you've enjoyed for 15 years, just without the added benefit of free childcare and financial contributions. I could almost hear her calculating, realizing that the arrangement still benefited them materially, if not as completely as they'd hoped. And the trust. Why can't Emma and Daniel access the money until they're 25? That's their college money. The trust includes provisions for educational expenses, I explained. But they'll need to apply directly to the trustee, not through you or James. I've ensured my grandchildren will be taken care of while protecting the funds from mismanagement. The implied criticism was clear, and Margaret didn't miss it. You think we'd misuse our own children's money? That's insulting. Perhaps, but given recent events, I'm not inclined to take chances with funds meant for their future. After more protests and accusations, Margaret finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. Where are you, Mum? The kids are upset. They deserve to know. I'm in Arizona. And yes, Emma and Daniel deserve to know. They deserve many things, including the truth about why I left. You abandoned your family over a misunderstanding, she said bitterly. No, Margaret. I was told explicitly that I wasn't family. I simply took you at your word and made arrangements accordingly. After Margaret hung up, James called separately, his approach more tactical. Elaine, I think we can work something out. He began, his business negotiation voice in full effect. Margaret was upset that day, said things she didn't mean. We all want what's best for the family. Family, I repeated. Interesting word choice, James. He ignored the comment. We're in a bit of a financial situation, actually. The business has some cash flow issues, and without your contributions to the household expenses. I see. So this call isn't about reconciliation, but about money. That's not fair, he protested. We miss you, of course. The kids especially. The kids are welcome to contact me directly, I told him. In fact, Emma already has. We had a lovely video chat yesterday. That caught him off guard. She didn't mention that. Perhaps she didn't feel comfortable sharing it with you given how you and Margaret have characterized my departure. After more circular conversation, I finally cut to the chase. James, what exactly do you want from this call? His hesitation told me everything. We were hoping you might reconsider the house situation. Maybe we could buy out your share over time. or you could remove the sale restriction. No to both, I said firmly. You're welcome to continue living there, but the ownership remains as is. And as for financial help with your business or household expenses, that chapter is closed. After James's call came predictable text messages from Margaret, alternating between guilt trips. How could you abandon your family like this? Attempts at reconciliation. We all miss you so much, and thinly veiled financial appeals. Emma's college applications are coming up, and we're worried about affording her first choice school. I responded politely but firmly to each, maintaining boundaries, while keeping the door open for a healthier relationship in the future. The most wonderful development came through the grandchildren. Emma, now 17, was increasingly independent and called or texted me regularly. We had honest conversations about what had happened. Mum and Dad told us you left because you wanted your freedom more than your family, she confided during one call. But I heard what Mum said to you. I know that's not the real story. There's fault on all sides, Emma, I said, not wanting to turn her against her parents despite everything. But yes, I was deeply hurt by being treated as an inconvenience after 15 years of being part of your lives. Can I visit you during spring break? She asked. I won't tell Mum and Dad right away. I'll pay for the ticket with my babysitting money. I agreed, but insisted on purchasing the ticket myself. Daniel, while less directly communicative, joined Emma's video calls. Occasionally his 15-year-old awkwardness giving way to genuine conversation as he realized I wasn't abandoning him. 6 months into my new life, I was sitting on my patio enjoying the sunset when my doorbell rang. Opening the door, I found Margaret standing there looking thin and tired. Nothing like the confident woman who had dismissed me from her life half a year earlier. "Mum," she said simply, her voice breaking. I invited her in, maintaining my composure, though my heart raced with conflicting emotions. "How did you find me?" I asked as I poured her a glass of water. "Emma," she admitted. "She finally told us after her visit last month. She said she couldn't keep lying about where she went for spring break." We sat in my living room, the silence heavy between us. "Your place is nice," Margaret finally said, looking around. "It suits you." "Thank you. It's become home." "Mum, she faltered, then tried again. "I said unforgivable things to you." "Yes, you did." I agreed, not making it easier for her. James and we got caught up in this lifestyle, this image we were trying to maintain. The house, the cars, the right schools, the right neighborhood, she continued. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of what really matters. Which is family, she said, tears forming. Real family, the kind that stands by you no matter what. The kind I had in you and then threw away. I remained silent, letting her continue. When you left, everything fell apart. Not just financially, though, that's been a nightmare. James's business is struggling. We've had to pull the kids from private school, and the house feels empty without you. She wiped her eyes. But the worst part is knowing how deeply we hurt you. How I hurt you. My own mother, who sacrificed everything for me. "Why are you here, Margaret?" I asked directly. "To apologize. To beg your forgiveness, though I don't deserve it," she said. "And to see if there's any way to rebuild what I destroyed." I studied my daughter's face, seeing genuine remorse, but also wondering how much of this visit was motivated by financial desperation. "James doesn't know you're here, does he?" I guessed. She shook her head. "He's too proud. Too ashamed, maybe. We're not in a good place, Mum. He blames me for driving you away, and he's probably right." We talked for hours that evening, peeling back layers of hurt misunderstanding and broken trust. I maintained firm boundaries about financial matters, but left the door open for emotional reconciliation. "I'm not coming back to Minnesota," I told her clearly. My life is here now and I'm happy, but I'm willing to work on our relationship if you're truly committed to change. Margaret left the next day with tentative plans for the grandchildren to spend part of their summer with me. James and I eventually had our own difficult conversation by phone, less emotional than Margaret's visit, but necessary for moving forward. Over the following months, healing began slowly. Emma spent 3 weeks with me that summer, flourishing in the desert environment and helping me with my newly established community garden plot. Daniel came for 2 weeks, discovering a passion for desert photography. By Christmas, I felt ready to visit Minnesota briefly. I stayed at a hotel rather than the house, maintaining healthy separation while still participating in holiday celebrations. James remained cordial but distant. Margaret continued working to rebuild our relationship, attending therapy to address her materialism and entitlement issues. As I settled into the second year of my new life, I reflected on the painful journey that had brought me here. The trust I established for Emma and Daniel remained intact, ensuring their education and future needs, regardless of their parents' financial situation. I maintained my legal rights to the house, but allowed the family to continue living there, recognizing that stability was important for my grandchildren. Most importantly, I had discovered my own worth beyond what I could provide for others. My watercolor paintings now hung in a local gallery. I volunteered teaching financial literacy to women in transition. I dated occasionally, enjoying male companionship without expectation or obligation. Family remains complex, precious, and sometimes painful. But the family we create through mutual respect and genuine love is infinitely more valuable than relationships maintained only for convenience or financial benefit. Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to stand up for your own worth. Thank you for joining me today, and remember that sometimes the most painful endings can lead to the most authentic and fulfilling new beginnings.